Two walls, side by side, in the same afternoon sun. One painted, white, bright as a salt flat. The other deep brown, almost black. You already know which one wins. Everybody does. The infrared gun reads the dark wall first, 142 degrees Fahrenheit. Then the white wall, 138. 4 degrees. 4 degrees. You painted your whole house to gain 4 degrees. The science says that's not wrong. It's just wildly incomplete, because the temperature your hand feels on the inside of that wall is not decided by color alone. It never was. Color is one of 3 variables, and it's the weakest one. Here's what every homeowner does and every hardware store confirms. Paint it white, or light gray, or any pale, high reflectance color. The logic is clean. Light surfaces reflect sunlight. Dark surfaces absorb it. Less absorption, lower surface temperature, cooler inside. Simple. And the logic is not wrong. It's incomplete. Tested in a dry desert climate. A white wall can peak 25 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than a dark one at the surface. At the surface. That's real. That's physics. Shortwave solar radiation hits the surface, and a high reflectance white coating bounces a significant portion of it back into the sky. So why did that infrared gun read 138 versus 142, not 118 versus 142? Because reflectance is only the first variable, and in most climates, the other two override it quietly and completely. The second hypothesis is more technical and more satisfying at first. Maybe the problem isn't just the color. Maybe it's thermal mass. A brick wall, a concrete wall, a thick masonry wall, these don't just heat up instantly. They absorb. They store. They release slowly. Like a battery that charges in the afternoon and discharges at night. Classic thermal lag. So, a lighter colored wall with the same thermal mass charges the battery less aggressively, right? Less solar input, less heat in storage, cooler interior by evening. That's the hypothesis. Run the numbers. A 12-inch concrete wall, clay brown, dense, facing west. The surface peaks at 142 degrees Fahrenheit by 4 in the afternoon. But the interior face of that wall doesn't peak until 9, 10 at night. The lag is 6 hours. Now paint it white, the surface drops to 138. 4 degrees less going in. 6 hours later, the interior face reads 3 degrees less. 3, not 20, not 15. 3. The thermal battery still fills up. It fills up from a slightly lower starting point, but it fills. Because here is what the hypothesis missed. The wall isn't just receiving solar radiation from above. It's receiving heat from else too. This is where most engineering references stop short, and where most homeowners stop understanding what's actually happening to their house. Open the manual. The calculation is there. Solar heat gain coefficient, surface absorptance values, reflectance tables. The white coating reflects solar shortwave radiation. The formula is clean. The recommendation follows logically. But the formula measures one source of heat. The sun. Your wall receives heat from many sources. Stand in front of that wall at 3 in the afternoon. The asphalt driveway to your left has been absorbing solar radiation since 8 in the morning. It is now re-emitting infrared long-wave radiation hit in all directions, including toward your wall. The neighbor's roof, the concrete curb, the gravel path, the brick chimney, all of them are radiating long-wave infrared by mid-afternoon. They became secondary suns, invisible, diffuse, radiating heat not as light but as warmth. And here's the problem. White paint reflects shortwave solar radiation beautifully. White paint does not reflect long-wave infrared at all. In emissivity terms, white paint and flat black paint are nearly identical. Both radiate and absorb long-wave heat at roughly the same rate. The difference between them as emitters and absorbers of thermal radiation is almost nothing. So in a landscape saturated with re-radiating surfaces, your white wall is receiving almost the same total heat load as your dark wall. The sun alone, white winds clearly, the full thermal environment. The gap narrows considerably. Go back to the very first experiment. 2 walls, same afternoon, same sun. 142, 138. But look at something that was visible the whole time. Something that didn't make the story at first. The dark wall is solid. Cladding sits directly on the structure. Wood behind, siding in front, nothing between them. The cavity, if you could call it that, is maybe half an inch. Stagnant air. Air that heats up, stays trapped, and continues cooking the wall from behind, even as the surface cools by early evening. The white wall is on the other cabin. Same basic structure, but the siding is mounted on vertical furring strips 3/4 of an inch off the face. There's a narrow gap, top and bottom. Not sealed. When the surface heats up, that gap lets air move. Not much. Not forced. Just the basic behavior of warm air. It rises. And as it rises, slightly cooler air enters at the bottom. The cavity breathes. That gap is not doing much from the outside, but it's doing everything on the inside. The variable that was never measured, the one that was sitting there in both setups the entire time, was not color. It was air movement in the wall cavity. The pioneer builders knew this. Not in those words. But they built it into every wall they raised. Here is the mechanism, the real one. Think of the wall cavity as a narrow corridor. When that corridor is sealed, any heat that enters stays. The air inside heats up. Hot air transfers heat to the interior surface of the wall. That surface radiates into the room. By evening, you feel it. That slow, steady warmth coming off the wall, long after the sun has set. Now open both ends of that corridor, just a sliver, at the bottom and at the top. Nothing dramatic. 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch. Open soffit at the bottom, open exit at the top, or at the top of the cladding. Warm air rises. This is not a design choice. It is gravity and density. Hot air is less dense. It moves up. Cooler air replaces it from below. The corridor is no longer a trap. It's a chimney. A slow, quiet, passive chimney that runs every second the temperature differential exists, which, in summer, is most of the day and much of the night. That chimney lowers the temperature at the back face of the cladding by 10, 15, sometimes 20 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on cavity depth, airflow clearance, and ambient conditions. The wall still absorbs heat. The wall still re-emits it. But the heat never accumulates behind the surface. It exits before it can transfer. This is why color is the weakest of the 3 variables. Color controls what enters the surface from the sun. Thermal mass controls how long heat stays in the material. Ventilated cavity controls whether that heat reaches your interior wall at all. The pioneer didn't have spray foam. didn't have reflective barriers, didn't have radiant-resistant sheathing, but almost every traditional cladding system in North America, tapered clapboard, shingle, board and batten, was, by its nature, slightly proud of the structure. There was a gap, an imperfect, unplanned, functional gap. Modern construction sealed that gap perfectly, for energy efficiency, for air tightness, and in doing so, converted the wall cavity from a passive ventilated corridor into a heat storage chamber. Before you add force, read the flow. Back to the original setup. Same two walls. Same afternoon. Same infrared gun. Now control the variable. Mount the dark wall cladding on furring strips. 3/4 inch gap, open bottom, open top. Sealed previously, open now. Mount the white wall cladding flat against the structure. No gap. Sealed. Same sun. Same 4-hour exposure. Same conditions. The infrared gun reads the surface temperatures, and yes, the white wall surface still reads lower. 136 to 141. 5 degrees difference. Color is doing what color does. But now measure the temperature at the inside face, the face touching the room. Ventilated dark wall. Inside face reads 89 degrees at peak. Sealed white wall. Inside face reads 94 degrees at peak. The ventilated dark wall is 5 degrees cooler on the interior face than the sealed white wall. The color is different. The interior result is inverted, because the variable that mattered was never the color. It was the air between the surface and the structure. So what do you do with a wall that's already built? First, diagnose the cavity. Look at the bottom edge of your siding. Is there open space? Is there a continuous air gap between the cladding and whatever's behind it? Or is the siding tight, sealed, caulked at every edge? If it's sealed solid, color is your only available variable, and it's the weakest one. If there's a gap but it's blocked at the top, warm air has no exit. The cavity traps heat the same way a sealed one does. Check the top edge, under the soffit, at the gable trim. Is there a path for warm air to exit? If both top and bottom are open, you may already have passive ventilation in your wall and not know it. The system is working, quietly, without you doing a thing. If the diagnosis shows sealed top or bottom, the fix is not a paint can. The fix may be as simple as removing a section of blocking at the top of the wall cavity, or cutting weep holes at the bottom course of siding, or respacing the bottom row to allow intake air. In some cases, a furring retrofit is feasible. Remove the siding run, add 1x2 vertical furring strips, reinstall the siding. Cost in materials: $40 to $80 per wall section at a local lumber yard. Cost in painted gallons to cover the same wall: $200, plus primer, plus labor. And then, there are situations where white is the right call. In arid climates with minimal surrounding re-radiation, where the landscape is pale, reflective, low density, short-wave solar absorption is genuinely the dominant variable. White works clearly there. The gap between white and dark on surface temperature can reach 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and the surrounding environment doesn't close that gap with long-wave re-radiation. In dense humid climates, with dark roofs, asphalt roads, neighboring structures radiating heat from all directions, the shortwave advantage of white is largely erased by long-wave absorption from everything around you. The cavity is the variable that matters, not the color. Knowing which situation your house is in determines whether you're solving the right problem or the expensive wrong one. Color is visible. So we measure it. We talk about it. We go to the store for it. Thermal mass is structural. It was decided when the wall was built. Most people can't change it. At cavity ventilation, the thing that decides what actually reaches your interior wall is often accessible, often fixable, often free or close to it. The wall was trying to breathe for as long as walls were built with imperfect, slightly gapped materials. Then we perfected them, sealed them, and wondered why the inside still felt like a furnace. The expensive solution fights the wrong problem. The color chart at the paint counter will not tell you this. The spec sheet for the reflective coating will not tell you this. The recommendation to go lighter is true, and almost entirely beside the point if your cavity has no path for air. What your hand feels on the inside of that wall tonight is the result of 3 variables working together, and one of them was invisible the entire time. The fix was always there. You just couldn't see it.